This tutorial is going to introduce variables as a way to create more dynamic and useful code. The goal is to replace hard-coded values, such as you see here down on the last line of this piece of code, where we have the position x and position y of the ellipse hard-coded as 250, meaning it's unchangeable, and the width and height of the ellipse at 40 pixels, meaning that's also unchangeable. So if we quickly hop over to this brief list of sort of variables, I'm just going to outline the primitive data types very quickly. So Boolean is one of the simplest. It's either true or it's false. And so you set a Boolean to either true or false, and then you can flip back and forth, and it's often used as a switch. A char or char, not sure which, is a single character, and when you test it, you always put single quotes around it. A byte is a small number between -128 and 127. A short is a slightly larger number between -32768 and 32767. An int is a whole number, and this is one of the most common variable types, and it's between a very large number, a very large negative number, and a very large positive number. Long is a huge number, meaning it's larger than this, which is 2 trillion. And it's commonly used if you're creating timers that are going to be running for long periods of time and just counting up and up and up and up. And float is another very common variable type, and that's a decimal number, and you'll see how we're going to use that as we move through this. So the big ones are Boolean, and for the purposes of the next few tutorials, int and float will be the ones we're most commonly working with, and eventually we'll also get to string and char or char. Okay, so going back here, we have just sort of a standard program. All the numbers are hard-coded, and what we want to do is replace one hard-coded value with a variable. So right up above setup, we're going to declare an int, so it's an integer, whole number, and we'll give it a variable name. And you have to make sure that whatever name you use, it should be descriptive, so you can remember when you're reading the code, you'll understand what it is standing for. So in this case, it's width, but I can't use width because width is part of the processing language, so I've replaced it with wide. So you type the variable with int, then you give the variable a name, and then set it to a value. And you declare the value up top. In later issues, you see where we'll change the value dynamically, but for right now, we're just hard setting this value inside of this variable. And then we go down here and we replace this with wide and wide. And so by declaring the value up at the top above setup, similar to what we've been talking about, the program runs from the top to the bottom. So it runs through this section where it basically reads any declarations and loads them into memory. Then it runs through the setup. Then it runs through the draw loop and stays inside the draw loop. So this if this happens up here, then it's a global variable, meaning it can be seen throughout the program. We'll get into global and local variables in a bit more detail later on. So let's just run this real quick. And now we can see it runs. It's sitting inside there. And if we take this and quickly change it. See, now we have the added benefit of not having to change two places. It changes both at the same time. Okay, so that's sort of a basic intro to variables. So the big things to keep in mind is declare them up at the top. Make sure to type them, meaning describe what type of variable it is. If it's an int or a float or a char or a string or a boolean, you have to type them. Then you have to give the variable a name that's not part of the language, and then give it a value. Okay.